Hey everybody, it's Maxine Taylor with another Trumpology report because yet another woman has come forward um, to talk about her affair with Donald Trump while he was married to Melania. Um, as a woman and an empath, it's very difficult for me to look at these charts. And I'm sure there will be more because there have been many. And there will be more. Um, Karen McDougal is the latest. I think, no, there was one right after her, but I'm going to talk about Karen McDougal now. She, to her credit, was incredibly apologetic to Melania, very sincerely apologetic to Melania, and which leads me to say, I wish I had Melania's birth time so that I could see exactly what is going on in her actual chart. The video I did on Melania last year only dealt with her solar chart because we don't have her birth time. But I remember after the Billy Bush situation with Trump, when that came out, Melania went on the air and said, don't worry about me, I'm very strong. And I'm sure she is. I'm sure she went into her marriage eyes wide open. I would love to see her prenup. Oh, I'm sure it's being updated with every woman who steps forward. So let's talk about Karen McDougal. Lovely person. Again, I do not have her birth time, which is a shame, but I do have her solar chart to share with you. She was born March 23rd, 1971 in Maryville, Indiana. And there's a lot that we can see in a solar chart, even though we don't have the birth time. I'm going to start with the 10th house. She has Mars in 6 Capricorn in the 10th house. Mars in the 10th is a very ambitious placement for Mars, always moving upward in the career. This means that she's not going to make lateral moves and that she wants to move upward. I think Donald Trump fell in that category. Although from what she says, she was sincerely in love with him and he with her. Again, this is the solar chart. The 11th house is very interesting. This is the house of friends, hopes, and wishes. Venus is there in Aquarius. So that she has a love of humanity, a very strong love of people in general. Her moon is in Aquarius. We don't know what degree, of course, but so she is a humanitarian, which in my book carries a lot of weight. Her north node is in Aquarius with Venus, conjunct Venus, which means her great love of humanity is going to be one of her calling cards, one of her finest qualities. With the sun in 2 degrees of Aries in the first house of the solar chart, naturally it's a me first chart because that is what the solar house does, brings in the me first quality. Now, I'm going to get to a couple of configurations in the chart that I'm going to address to astrologers and astrology students. And those of you who don't study astrology, don't worry about figuring out what I'm saying, just listen to the interpretation, okay? Now, she has Saturn in her 2nd house. Saturn is the planet of reality and crystallization. And so there is a very strong desire on the part of those who have Saturn in their 1st to create more money because there's the fear of not having enough money. I'm going to get to this in a minute because Trump's midheaven is on that Saturn. Okay? So the older authority figures in her life said, get the money, honey, and she would do that because of the fear of not having enough money. That's just how it is. The South Node in the 5th house says that fun and games and children and creativity of all types, she has mastered that, which is quite lovely. Now, here we go. She has a T-cross between her 11th house planets, Saturn, and the South Node. The empty arm of that T cross is the 8th house of other people's money. And so that is what is in her birth chart. Trump triggered that. So I'm going to get to that in a second again, but while I'm thinking of it, I'm throwing it out there for those of you who have her solar chart and are working with it on your own. Her Pluto, the planet of control or transformation, is behind the 7th cusp. And so there is an element of wanting to be in control, but being controlled in relationships. Her Uranus in the 7th house of partnerships means that she attracts very unique partners to her, very unique people. And in a minute, I'll show you that Trump fell into that category. Well, of course he would. There aren't that many like him. He would be very unique, and to a young girl, very attractive. Okay. Her Neptune in the 9th house paints her as an idealist, somebody who has faith, perhaps even a spiritual faith, because the 9th house is the higher mind. Jupiter in 6th Sagittarius, in its own sign, says that she believes in truth. So she combines a certain idealism, perhaps inspiration, with truth. And this may be one of the reasons that she's come forward now, because as she said, she wants to tell her story. She wants to tell her truth. And this is why she could be sincerely apologetic to Melania. I give her a lot of credit for that. I really do. I do think that, well, doesn't matter what I think. Now, let's talk about what Trump triggers in her chart, because I had already started talking about that. So, even if a planet from his chart is not sitting right on top of a planet in hers, if it's in that house, it activates it. As you know, my mantra is conjunctions tell the tale, and the house position is number 1 in my book. So we're starting up here with Trump's vertex in her 10th house. The vertex is your karmic role in life. And so she would have, whether consciously or unconsciously, seen Trump as a way for a role change that would help her move upward. I am not saying she did this intentionally or with any maliciousness. She has said that she was in love and that he told her he loved her on many occasions. So I'm talking about things that go on subconsciously in our own minds that we don't even know about, possibly. Now, Trump's midheaven sits on her Saturn. Saturn, as I mentioned to you, is part of a T-cross. Those of you who don't study astrology, this is where you tune us out, okay? The empty arm is the 8th house of other people's money, of secrets, because after all, Trump was married when he had this 10-month affair with her. He had a son with Melania during that time. And so his authority triggered the parental, the should and ought to message from the should and ought to people in her life, the should and ought to authority figures, get the money, honey. And so that was triggered. It's her Saturn squares Venus and the nodes, so that there is a certain sadness involved in her love relationships. And the empty arm, of course, as I said, is the 8th house. Now, Trump's Uranus, North Node, and Sun sit in her 3rd house, firing up her mind, triggering all kinds of ideas, all kinds of travel, perhaps, not necessarily long distance, but short distance, and the Moon South Node in her 9th house, long distance. But the problem with having an affair is you have to keep it quiet. And with her Jupiter in Sagittarius, that may not be what she's a woman of truth. So this would have created an issue for her. Lots of terrific ideas that he triggered in her mind. Well, we could run off and do whatever, or yes, we could be married and whatever. So he fired up her thinking, her ideas. And his Sun is trine her Venus, and that is a beautiful, and her node, north node, sextile her south node. So there is a love there. And remember, the nodes are karmic placements in the chart. So his Mercury, Saturn, and Venus fell in in her fourth house. And this triggers all kinds of ideas about home and family, beautiful ideas, I would think. Let me just see something here. Here we go. Yes, his Mercury would have triggered a T-cross between her Sun and her Pluto-Uranus, the empty arm of which was that Mars in the 10th. So the T-cross is Mars, Sun, Pluto-Uranus, and so Trump's fourth house planets filled that in, giving rise to, gee, I could make a home with him. And he, apparently, according to her report, took her up to Trump Tower, took him up to his home, which would have absolutely triggered all kinds of dreams, thoughts of a beautiful home, Venus in the fourth house, stability, his Saturn in the fourth, and just his Mercury in the fourth, all kinds of ideas about home and family. Now, Trump's Pluto is in her fifth house, lots of intense sexual action, but his Mars and ascendant are on her south node. The south node is karmic from the past. Mars deals with passion, sex, war. His ascendant is on her south node. There is still a very strong personal connection between the two of them. I don't mean they're in communication, but there is that feeling. Now, his Neptune, Jupiter sit on her Pluto, Uranus. And so he would have triggered the desire to, would have triggered the message that she's going to attract very unique, very independent, innovative people into her life. Neptune there is the dream. Oh, wishful thinking, wherever Neptune is, that's our dream. And he fired that up in her chart. His moon and south node are in her ninth house. They don't sit on her Jupiter, Neptune, but they do open her thoughts to bigger and better vistas, so to speak. Okay, I would give anything to have her birth time. Now let's talk about what she triggers in Trump's chart. And I'm going to change out my charts here. I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg because those of you who study astrology know there's so much involved in a chart comparison, and it is so frustrating when we don't have a birth time. I think I've said that about 4 times already on this video. So anyhow, I think I'll stop saying that. You all get the picture. Now let's talk about what she triggers, what Karen triggers in Trump's chart. This is very simple. Her south node, tie from the past, sits on his Mars behind the scenes. So it does indicate the potential for a behind the scenes relationship that is of a very passionate nature, and sits on his ascendant. And so there's a very strong influence on her part, which is why he would have been attracted to her. Not the only reason, of course. She was and is a beautiful woman. She was a beautiful girl. She's a beautiful woman. And he is attracted to that. Naturally, being involved with Playboy gave her added attractiveness. Okay, so all of this behind the scenes activities of a passionate nature. We don't know. It could have been any type of passionate nature, but of course, with somebody beautiful, it is a sexual nature. Her Pluto-Uranus on his Neptune-Jupiter changed his values, triggered his wishful thinking. And when somebody's Pluto sits on any of your planets, they control that area of your life. Now, they can transform it, but Pluto is essentially the planet of control. And so her Pluto which is in 28 degrees of Virgo, sits on his Neptune, uh, controlling his dream. And Neptune rules his eighth house of other people's money. And I thought it was interesting that after they had been intimate, he gave her money and she rejected it. So other people's money. Okay, giving other people money. You get the picture. This fired up all kinds of ideas in his life about, well, her Uranus on his Jupiter. Jupiter rules his fifth house of sex, of children, of fun. You get the tie-in. Let's see. Her Neptune, Jupiter in his fourth house, while it does not sit on his moon, Pluto, does give him the same visions of perhaps expanding his home base. I don't know that he would move her into Trump Tower, but he could create a home for her. Remember, Neptune is wishful thinking as well as divine inspiration. When it is involved in an affair, a sexual relationship of a hidden nature between two people, it tends often to be wishful thinking because it is the dream come true. And that's a bubble that can easily burst. And that's what's happening now. Now, her Mars sits in his fifth house. And even though it's not on his vertex, it fires up his desire for sexual activity. Well, there you go. Her moon, again, we don't know what degree it's in. Venus and North Node sit in his sixth house of work, which is neither here nor there, but she certainly would make his daily activities enjoyable. There was a T-cross here I wanted to talk about. Yes. It's her Saturn and her node and Venus and her south node that trigger the empty arm of Trump's chart, which is, in other words, her T-cross becomes his T-cross, and the empty arm of that is his third house and the IC, home and family. There's a lot of a technical nature, but I'm just going to go into the simple house placements. Her Mercury in his seventh house, wherever Mercury is what you think about and talk about, partnership. Naturally, he thought in terms of a one-on-one relationship with her. Her Sun sits in his eighth house. The Sun is the giver of life. That's the center of our life. And this is the eighth house of secrets. I don't have to say any more. It was secret until recently. And Saturn, her Saturn in his ninth house, behind his midheaven, indicates that she had a great deal of control from behind the scenes over his career. I'm going to stop here for now. If anybody finds her birth time, if you will share it with me, I will be very grateful. I'll announce your name and I'll get a more accurate picture of the relationship between Trump and Karen McDougal. As I said, I'm sure there's more coming up. This totally drains me when I am involved in looking at these types of relationships, multiple relationships that one person has. And I'm speaking as a woman in that case. I'm also speaking as an empath because there's a great deal of sadness and hurt feelings and anger on the part of the women coming forward. So I turn this over to you. I hope it's helpful to you. I would not normally bring these comparison charts to light on my YouTube channel, but they've reached front page news. And because of that, I've done this particular chart, and of course, Stormy's chart. She's made front page news, of course. The ones who are not front page are still there. and I probably won't touch them. So I hope this is helpful to you, and I want to thank all of you who send such beautiful compliments to me. I will continue to do this as long as you are interested. So, dear friends, thank you so much for being receptive to what I have to offer, and bless you, and may the stars shine so brightly on you and yours. Bye for now.